right, we got 1 minute, folks. So,
Ooh, exciting.
yeah, you want to drop down? We will get you back shortly. Want to let the folks in, Billy?
You all ready? Let's do it.
Hmm. Next week, do we need to wear Christmas hats?
We need to get into it now. Although we've been celebrating Christmas every episode, it
About a
feels
month.
like to some extent.
Hey,
Yeah, I
December
love it.
is my month.
I know you're a Christmas lady. Hey, start decorating in January.
January,
Yeah.
November.
Well, I've been getting ready for December.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's good. Yeah, I finally got the last of my decorations up yesterday.
Oh my gosh, you're late.
Oh, I know, I know. I would not pass the Renee test on
You would
Christmas
not.
decorating. Yes. That's
All right.
okay, man. Everybody find your happy spot,
There
right?
you
But
go.
yeah. Life's short. Let's enjoy it as we go.
Exactly. All right, it's 11 o'clock. You ready to
Let's
go?
do it.
All right. Hi, I'm Renee Williams,
And I'm Billy Thomas.
and welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. You know, in December, we've kind of had Christmas after Christmas after Christmas editions.
No, I
Next
love
week will be the same with
it.
conifers. But this week, we are talking about some little hitchhikers that might come in your Christmas decoration.
No, Renee, it's so great to be with you. And hello, everybody. Hopefully, everybody's doing great on this fine December morning. Yeah, beautiful day here in Lexington, Kentucky. A little rainy and overcast, but yeah, we're here to celebrate the Christmas spirit. And as Renee indicated, we've got a great show for you all today. We've got our resident forest entomologist, Dr. Jonathan Larson, is going to be talking about some of those hitchhikers that might make their way in when we bring in some things from
Inside.
the outside to the inside. So we're really, we always love having Dr. Larson on here. He does such a great job of, we'll be looking out for some of these hitchhikers that might be trying to invade into our homes this winter. So look forward to that. We also have Dr. Ellen Crocker with us. She's going to be talking about an invasive pesky plant that we're having to deal with, and it's the bittersweet. And there's a little bit of controversy going on about renaming this species. I
Mhm.
don't know if she'll bring it up, but yeah, it's been recently renamed. So there's a few different names out there, round leaf and others, but we're going to be dealing with bittersweet and not the one we want. So we'll have Dr. Crocker talking about that. If you all have any questions for our presenters, please use the chat function. And if you're on Zoom with us live, and if you're a YouTube viewer or a podcast listener, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. But you can interact with us via email at forestry.extension@uky.edu, and we can respond that way. And Renee, just glad to be with you today as we're kind of wrapping up 2025 with another great show on From the Woods Today.
Yes, definitely. So, Dr. Larson, if you want to turn on your camera. So, today we are talking about.
I love it. Oh, our podcast listeners, I'm sorry, but Dr. Larson's got this giant insect mask on. He's getting into character, as always, bringing it strongly. Dr. Jonathan Larson.
I was hoping that would work better, but the headphones were not fitting.
I thought it worked great. All right.
Okay.
So again,
I was like, I'm not going to be able to hear him.
All right, our podcast viewers have to get to this episode on YouTube. So.
Yeah, go to fromthewoodstoday.com and at least see what we were laughing at. I mean, it was funny. It was an alien mask with with a Santa hat on. It was hilarious.
This is a self-created character. His name is Mantis Claus, and he is a non-denominational holiday spirit, but he celebrates at the holiday time. I'm actually going to wear it to the holiday party at the entomology department tomorrow and pass out the gift cards and stuff.
That'll be great.
That'll be great.
Oh, yeah. Well, it'll be a big hit. Oh, well, thanks for being with us today, for sure.
All right. Yeah. So we're talking about those little critters that like to hitch a ride inside our homes.
Yeah, they like to come inside. It's a special time of year for them and for us. I was going to ask, do you both have how do you celebrate Christmas? Are you both Christmas lovers? I heard some allusions to that when we started.
Yeah, yes. I don't think I hold a torch to Renee when it comes to Christmas, but I'm a big fan. And yes, we celebrate. We do get a live tree from a local tree lot here in Kentucky and bring it in and decorate it shortly after Thanksgiving, typically, and try to keep it watered throughout.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yep, and then either donate it or try to make it habitat afterwards.
And
And
Renee,
see
do
with
you have a tree?
yeah, well, what I do is I do have a fake tree, but that is because if I'm going to do all of that work, I'm going to keep it up for a while. So literally, I'm taking Halloween down as Christmas goes up, typically. And sometimes I have Christmas lights and pumpkins outside.
Okay, okay. I like the overlap,
Uh,
some Nightmare Before Christmas in
yeah.
there a
Exactly,
little bit.
right?
Hey,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
we're celebratory people,
That's
Jonathan.
right.
Sorry, man.
I like that about forestry and you two in particular. Uh, I think it's cool when people have real trees. I'll talk a little bit about that as I go through. But it is one of those things that can sometimes invite interesting house guests for the holiday season. So we'll just talk a little bit about Christmas trees and where they come from. But then I'll talk specifically about some of the different arthropods that pop up in there. And if either of you have ever experienced these, I hope that you'll chime in and share
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
your lived stories
Yeah.
as well.
We may eke out on you there.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Larson.
Thank
No
you.
problem. So I just wanted to start by kind of giving a primer on what we're talking about. I'm one of those people that I really love little micro histories of things. And one of the things that I love to just do little research trips on the internet are some of our holiday traditions. I've long been obsessed with sort of the origins of jack-o'-lanterns and things of that nature. And one of the things that I like to look into a little more, I guess, is some of the things that we do at Christmas. Because I remember distinctly being a kid, maybe like 9 or 10 years old, and as I'm helping my family like prop up a pine tree in our living room, and I'm covered in sap, and we're about to just like slather it in ornaments and all these things that we've kept through generations of family, passed down from person to person. The thought struck me about how strange a situation this is. Like we've hauled a living organism into the living room. We sometimes, chopped it down, or we bought it off somebody that chopped it down. And if you just were an alien and you landed here and you saw humans doing this, you might have a momentary pause to be like, what is this? Like, why are they doing this? And Christmas trees have an interesting history, I would argue. I'm guessing that some people in forestry have talked about this before amongst yourselves or on the show perhaps, but they've been a part of our Christmas culture for centuries. They've long been a part of Christian sort of traditions in Central Europe. There are lots of historians that look at Christmas tree history and they'll date it into like the 1400s or so. The first confirmed representation of a Christmas tree that we have, like an icon of it, a figure of it, is there's a keystone at it's a big building in Germany, and there is a Christmas tree that is etched into this keystone, and this dates to 1576, which tells us that there was a strong Christmas tradition, at least at that point, of using Christmas trees as part of the celebrations. It's long been associated primarily with Protestant history. The image you see on the left is a drawing, an ink drawing of Martin Luther as he sits around his Christmas tree. Martin Luther is famous for starting Lutheranism and, of course, the history of the Protestant church within Christianity. And this is him apparently in this artist's rendering, sitting around the Christmas tree. I think he's got like a mandolin or something in his hand, enjoying time with his family as they stare at what I would argue is a wildly unsafe thing. It is a tree that is drying and rapidly dying, and it's covered in flames. It's got candles burning on it. This was a tradition that started in certain churches in this area where they would celebrate Christmas trees by putting candles on them and lighting them up, which comes to us today as putting the strings of light on. There's been stars and angels on them. There were trees that were a part of plays at the time that were about not just the nativity, but about kind of the history as Christianity imagined it of humanity. And there was a tree that they would put apples in on Christmas Eve on December 24th. And the apples today usually pop up, and instead of being an apple, as a red globe that we will put on there, those baubles that we hang on the tree. So there's lots and lots of history loaded into this. It's traced mainly to Central Europe, Germany, and then also the Baltic states. You can see in the image on the right, this is in Berlin. They're celebrating both Hanukkah and Christmas at the same time, but the Christmas tree there in the foreground, in front of that famous gate there in Berlin, is huge, and just a reminder of kind of the proud history they have in Germany of using Christmas trees to help celebrate the season. So that begs the question, why? Why would they do this? There are some people, if you read various like blogs and things about the history of Christmas and Christmas decorations, there's a strong connection that some people draw to pre-Christian traditions that involve pagan tree worship. I don't necessarily see all of this as connected, but I am just an amateur historian, so I'm not going to stand on my soapbox or anything. But it is important to point out that humans have long venerated trees. We hold trees in high esteem, and we particularly hold evergreens in high esteem because, well, they look alive in the winter. And that is strange in comparison to their sort of more woody, just cousins that are out there, no leaves, standing around naked in the winter. The evergreens seem like they're full of life and vitality for the entire year. So there's been associations with this with the Egyptians and Romans and Celtics throughout the millennia. They would hang boughs of evergreens, sometimes holly and things like that. One of the ways that we actually can see this translated to today, the image you see on the right there is a Christmas spirit from the Christmas Carol. This is the ghost of Christmas Present, who is often drawn in the same way as another Christmas character known as Father Christmas. And Father Christmas is generally drawn with these sort of wreaths of holly upon his head. And he's always got kind of big, bushy red beard and big, bushy red hair. If you've seen Mickey's Christmas Carol or Muppet's Christmas Carol, you've seen sort of cartoon or puppet images of this. But it's actually a really long-standing tradition. And he usually has this like green robe on with white fur. But he is also associated with an ancient sort of mythological character called the Holly King. The Holly King and the Oak King go through cycles. The holly is at its peak in the winter, in the autumn solstice, and then into the spring, while the Oak King is the opposite. The Oak King is strong in the summer. And all of this is kind of bundled together. And again, we translate this throughout our own histories and we pass it down to each other, and things get changed and corrupted. And so today you see the giant Christmas spirit in these Christmas Carol things, and not everybody is aware that it actually kind of has this long-standing history, and it's connected to these trees that we collect and bring inside as well. One thing I will say about Christmas tree production is that it's a lot of fun to go and take a look at. I've worked with our local Christmas tree industry a couple of times over the years, given a few talks for them, and they're all a fascinating bunch because to me, it's a heck of a thing to commit yourself to producing this particular product. It's available, 2 months out of the year, but it's a 12-month out of the year job to produce. And some of that comes down to taking care of the tree and shaping them, also making sure that they're well watered and loved and fertilized and things like that. But it also involves a considerable amount of pest management. I don't want to make it sound like these trees are inundated with insecticides. The growers follow a lot of integrated pest management tactics, but they are besieged at various times by some of these different insects that you see here. I know this is a laundry list, but some of the most popular trees that we grow for Christmas trees are firs. Then there's also pines and spruces. And you can see just a smattering of the insects that would feed on any of these. Firs tend to get aphids. They can also be infested with bagworms. There's a few things that are sort of specific, not specific to them, but they prefer these over other things. This can include some of the different mites, and scale insects. One of the newer insects that we're dealing with in Christmas tree production is the elongate hemlock scale, which, as the name implies, like hemlock, but they'll also get on these trees that we have in production. There's various bark beetles that get in pines. There's the white pine weevil and pine sawflies. Pines have one that's a little more specific, the pine needle scale. They also get elongate hemlock scale. They also get this thing called the Zimmerman pine moth, which if you've ever seen an infestation, they produce these bizarre sort of pitchy masses that look like popcorn, which is again kind of a connection to Christmas. We thread popcorn and put it up as tinsel on the tree, but this is located lower on the tree. It's just this big gummy mass that kind of has these weird shapes in it, and it looks like popped corn all glued to the tree. The last group that we have here, the spruces, they get Cooley spruce gall aphid, which causes these big bulging galls to appear at the tips of branches. Again, they can get bagworms and different scale insects on them, as well as those spruce spider mites. I'm not going to go through all these pests and talk about what they are and what they do, but the growers that I was mentioning before, they have an association here in Kentucky, the KCTA, the Kentucky Christmas Tree Association, and they have a website where you can go and type in your zip code, if I remember correctly, and you can find a farm that's near you. Billy was mentioning before the experience, right? That's kind of what you're buying when you do this activity. It's not necessarily just about the tree, but it's about a family ritual that you're going out, you're selecting these plants together. You get to see the farm. A lot of times this is about the smell of the farm, right? You get that wonderful pine odor in the air, that evergreen smell, but you're also perhaps going to get a hot chocolate or two, or maybe a hot cider. There's probably going to be old Santa Claus standing around somewhere. Maybe you get your picture taken with him a couple times, and there might even be Rudolph or different reindeer that's popping up, different animals that you can interact with. Lots of these growers, they really buy into the ecotourism part. So I highly encourage people to think about visiting that website and finding a local farm. It sometimes is appointment only. You got to get out there and get out there early so you can get the tree that you want, but it is a wonderful experience. They combat all these pests with different management tools. Sometimes they're using oil, sometimes they're using true synthetic insecticides. But when the tree is ready to go, when it's time for you to buy it and take it home, this is a short video showing you one other thing that you may encounter. Some of you have probably seen these before. It's called a tree shaker. So this guy, I hope the video is working. He's going to haul the tree up. I got this off of Reddit. This is a Christmas tree grower, and he puts it on there and gives the tree just like the greatest massage ever, right? Like it's vibrating out of existence. He's explaining, how this works. You just set it down there, the base where they've cut it, and it vibrates the tree, not at, supersonic frequencies or anything, but it is shaking it hard enough to dislodge some of the insects that we're going to talk about here today. Because Christmas trees are living organisms, they can harbor lots of different critters inside of them. We've all seen A Christmas Vacation. I've never had a squirrel pop out of a tree or anything like that, or a bird, but I have had many, many calls, many, many interactions where people have dealt with insects or different kinds of arthropods in the tree. So some of them, they're just simply sort of inviting themselves into this tree to use it as an overwintering spot. My example here is a spider. So spiders, they can live for multiple growing seasons. Generally speaking, we would be talking about some of the bigger, sort of beefier spiders when we're talking about this. And we're talking about female spiders. Female wolf spiders, for example, can live at least a couple of growing seasons. But in order to do that, they have to find somewhere that they can hide out for the winter. For a lot of them, they would do this under the bark of a dead tree. But for others, they'll get into living trees and then they'll settle in. If they can find somewhere to hide themselves, spiders will often be under something, and then they'll spin this kind of hibernaculum around themselves, this silken structure that helps to protect them and kind of keep them safe. But if you bring that inside, it's going to start getting toasty and warm, and it's going to wake up. Stink bugs, a lot of people get worried about them performing the same activity. We do get a lot of stink bug calls in December where they might get warm on a certain day and start crawling around. They tend to prefer deciduous trees if they're going to overwinter in trees, but it is possible for them to end up in pines and spruces and firs, where then, again, you bring it in and the tree warms up after it's been outside all summer and then fall and then early winter where it's been in the tree lot perhaps. And those insects are going to warm up too, and then they're going to begin to wander. So the spiders, the stink bugs, they could all be doing this in order to try and survive the winter. A lot of the other ones that we're going to talk about today, they have a very different behavior. So these ones are the ones that tend to get shook out of the tree by that shaker I showed a moment ago, something that's just kind of hiding out. If they're under bark or inside of certain parts of the plant, that might be a little more difficult. But most of the time they get shook out and then they're back out in nature looking for somewhere to go. The other ones that we'll talk about, though, are not going to get shook out of the tree because they've been laid in the tree as eggs. A lot of insects overwinter as eggs, and the eggs are protected usually and they're glued to things. Eggs tend to be very immobile because of that, and they don't usually get shook out of the tree very easily. The other option that we could see that doesn't get shook out of the tree, shaken out of the tree, would be something that's living inside of the actual trunk of the plant or in the branches where they're a wood-boring pest and they're deeper in the wood. And again, they're not going to get shaken out there because they're inside of the plant. So that shaker is great. It helps with a lot of different things that you don't want to bring into your home necessarily. Just because you're not looking for multi-legged Christmas guests, you already have family coming over and you don't need that on top of it. But there's other ones that they're not going to get shook off. And these are the ones that could start popping up as you get closer to Christmas Day. And what we're dealing with here is something that is very kind of pertinent to the insect's life cycle. I've talked about on this show before how insects survive the winter. Just as a refresher, Insects, their life is almost completely dictated by the climate that they're surrounded by. A lot of organisms are like this, but insects are somewhat unique in that their body is driven by temperature in particular. They cannot deal with temperatures in the way that we do. They are the same temperature as whatever sort of temperature surrounds them. They can avoid hot temperatures by going under a rock or under a log or going into shade. They can avoid cold temperatures by moving somewhere warmer, trying to avoid the cold air temperatures, but it is very difficult for insects to stay warm in the winter. And this means that their development through their life cycle is impacted by that temperature. Insects develop through a system that we have called degree days. So, degree days are an accumulation of development on days above a certain temperature. The two examples that you see here, we have a monarch butterfly and then a grasshopper. The monarch butterfly goes through complete metamorphosis, where there's an egg, and then a larva, and then a pupa, and then an adult, which looks very different from the larva. On the other hand, we have this incomplete development where we have eggs. The eggs hatch into a nymph. The nymph grows and grows and grows, and eventually will develop wings with most insects, and then becomes an adult. To move between these nymphal stages, to move between the larval stages or the pupal stages, or even to just hatch from an egg, a certain number of days at certain numbers of temperatures has to be accumulated by the insect. Insects can alter the effects of some of this by developing in specialized habitats. Some insects, they'll be down in the soil. If you've ever dealt with white grubs, the soil is not just their home because that's where turf roots are. The soil also protects the grub from temperature extremes. It doesn't get very hot or very cold down there. It tends to be a very steady temperature. You can avoid the frost line by moving lower in the soil profile. All of these things are helpful to protect the insect and also keep it on a steady track of development. Sometimes when they're not in these protected habitats, we have what we call stop and grow development, where the insect develops as it gets warm and then it's arrested in development when it's cold. It doesn't go backwards, it doesn't reduce in development, but an insect can be arrested to the point where it's not going to go from one life stage to the next because of cold temperatures. That's what they would experience if that Christmas tree stayed outside. Unfortunately, when we bring them from outdoors to indoors, we begin to alter this equation. So this is a generalized growing degree day formula. Everybody thought they were just going to have happy, joyous Christmas conversation with Jonathan today, but no, you get math. Everybody gets to deal with math now. When we are talking about growing degree days, this is the most simple way to explain it in order to understand kind of the mathematics behind what we're dealing with here. So to understand how many growing degree days have been accumulated on a specific day, you take the high temperature and low temperature for that day, you add them together, and then you divide that by 2. This is in this parenthetical here, so inside the parentheses, this equation is done first. Then in the base 50 model that we use is kind of just the basic average, you would subtract 50 degrees off of the resultant temperature that you get in the first equation. And then whatever number you get after that is the number of growing degree days that were accumulated that day. So in my example equation, we have 75 as the high temperature, 55 as the low. You divide the resulting sum by 2 and subtract 50 from it. You end up with 15 degree days on this hypothetical day. Right now, outside in Lexington, Kentucky, we are at 0 growing degree days today. We are not going to get over 50 degrees. That's what the 50 is for, is the base threshold that we have to cross for development to begin. And if you don't get over that, you're not going to end up with any growing degree days that day. When we do this subtraction, if you end up with a negative number, you always set it to 0 because there is not negative development. You just say that it's arrested and we're at 0. When we bring those insects inside, guess what? The high and low temperature in your home at this time of year, most people, what are we dealing with? Maybe like 67, 68 degrees all day long. You're not changing the temperature very much. You get very steady degree day development. And unfortunately, the mathematics on this usually add up to having these eggs or these pupa or whatever it is that's on the tree. They begin to hatch or eclose right around Christmas Day. So you go downstairs, all the presents are there, Santa has visited, the cookies are gone, the reindeer have eaten their carrot sticks, and you go to get on the presents, and all of a sudden you start seeing things move on top of the presents or nearby, and that's when people freak out and they want to know what has happened. What are some of the insects that could do this? There's quite a few. I picked a few select ones that I thought were interesting visually or interesting sort of story-wise. One of the ones that we get some questions about every so often are bark beetles. So bark beetles, there's a variety of species out there, many of them like evergreens. When they get into the evergreens, they are living inside of the bark and developing underneath the bark. Some of these are boring through the wood. Some may feed on the wood. A lot of them actually feed on fungi that they grow in the wood instead. And so they're not actually damaging the tree directly, but they're growing fungus inside of it, which can also sometimes be problematic. When they're developing in there, they will go into the winter and either pupate or they may be hiding out in there as a larva that is going to pupate, or they may be ready to close and become an adult. When they get warm, as the tree is brought in, they become activated. Their life cycle again starts to develop. The tree is not alive anymore, right? Not really, because it's going to slowly start to die unless you are using one of those new trees where it's balled up and it's grown again after you've used it for Christmas. Then it is alive, and that means it's an even better host. But what's happening inside of the tree is they'll either pupate and then complete their pupation in the nice steady temperatures you're providing, or they may have been hiding out there as an already eclosed adult that's ready to come out. Whichever it is, they'll start to bore their way out, and you'll see these little tiny pinprick holes appear at the base of the tree or in the wood, in the bark, and the trunk of the tree. There will also be sawdust accumulation. This could be on the bark itself, but sometimes it sprinkles down onto whatever's below it. So maybe sometimes the watering dish, other times onto gifts that you're staging beneath the tree, or onto the Christmas tree blanket that goes underneath of it. These bark beetles, they're not a problem for your home. They are small tubular beetles. You can see one here. They kind of have this hooded thorax that goes over their head. It makes it look like they're wearing a hoodie all the time. They're quite small. They're quite diminutive. They're not very impressive looking insects. There can be lots of them in any given tree. We deal with the southern pine beetle here in Kentucky, and we can have numerous occasions where they're at pest levels. We haven't had a strong outbreak of those in some time, from what I understand from Linrisky Kinney, but I think that we're kind of due for one. But they tend to be fairly host specific. They want to infest the same tree that their parents did. The important thing to point out here is that these are not powder post beetles or anything like a termite or a carpenter ant. They're not going to infest the wood of your home. They're not going to be able to go from the tree into your hardwood floor or into the wooden mantle that you may have nearby. They're simply going to crawl out of this tree, and they're probably going to die. Most of the insects that we're going to talk about here, when they enter a home in the winter and they emerge or they come out as grown-ups or however it is that they're alive, they tend to not survive for very long. Our homes in the winter are very dehumidified. It's very dry, and that's not healthy for insects. They can lose moisture pretty quickly, and then they perish. They'll also just sort of fly around and ping off of windows and then exhaust themselves, and they may perish that way. Most of these insects, they can't get established indoors. They're just going to die as a part of your holiday celebration. Some of the other insects that we get questions on that this happens with every so often are scale insects. I think I've talked about scales on here before, but just as a small primer, these are really small true bugs. So they're part of order Hemiptera. They feed on the sap of plants. They tend to suck juices out. So these are cousins to the aphids, the cicadas, the plant hoppers, and things like that. But they're very unusual compared to their relatives because most of them are essentially immobile, particularly the females of the species that we see here. They will glue themselves in place as a nymph. The nymph can crawl as it emerges from an egg. And then as they glue themselves to the plant, they will start to sort of coat themselves in wax in some cases, or just feed and feed and feed. But they never move again. They're nature's greatest couch potato. There are some species where the male, as it matures, they will become winged adults, so they can fly around and mate with the females. Other times, there are no males, there's just females, and they reproduce through parthenogenesis. So they drink sugar water all day long. They don't have to hang out with dudes. They just make their daughters, and then they create the next generation, which sounds like a pretty good gig if you can get it. The adult males, if they are a part of that setup, when they get their wings, they're not around for very long. They usually only live for about 1 to 2 days, so they can find females and mate, and then they perish. With the scales, we have two different kinds. There are armored scales, which when they glue themselves down, they begin to form this separate sort of protective cover that hides their entire body. You can see these armored scales here on the left. They look like the bark. They kind of match the bark of the plant that they're feeding on. But when you rip that test off, that scale covering off, we actually see the real insect underneath, which are those orange discs in the image on the right. A gross overgeneralization about armored scales are that they tend to overwinter as eggs. So generally speaking, the female lays the eggs and then she lays them underneath herself and the waxy coating that she lives under. And now they're protected from some of those cold air temperatures by this dual layer of protection. That's not true of every armored scale, but it's kind of a good generalization. And it means that in some cases, when you bring a Christmas tree inside, those armored scale eggs will warm up and they will hatch and crawlers will begin to move around. An example of a species this could occur with would be pine needle scales. These are found on all pines and spruces. They like Douglas and Fraser firs. All of these are popular Christmas tree varieties, or species, I should say. They are generally well controlled in Christmas tree nurseries because they can harm the plant. They also can create unsightly damage, as you see here. It seems almost like the tree has been pre-frosted. If you've ever done that flocking on the plant, you can put that white stuff on there. These scales, the part of the population, the mature females, they have these white coverings, these white tests on them, and that creates this kind of grayish white tint to the needles that are infested. But generally speaking, the growers will manage these, but there could be small populations of them, and then the crawlers could hatch while it's inside. It is conceivable that the crawlers could fall off of the plant and end up on things below. But if this happened, I would guess that most people are not going to notice this. The other type of scales that we can find outdoors are soft scales, which are leathery and bulbous in appearance typically. They have a hard body wall, but they don't have this extra covering. And as a result, again, a vast overgeneralization. They don't tend to lay their eggs in the fall. They tend to be fertilized females in the fall. They mate, but then they overwinter as this tough, durable female that then will lay the eggs next year. So we deal with fewer soft scale crawlers as a result of Christmas trees being brought in. So we won't go into much detail about them. There is a newer invasive species that's out there that could potentially end up in your home. Spotted lanternflies will sometimes use pines as an egg laying site. Spotted lanternfly, we talk about this a lot here in entomology because it's kind of the hot ticket new invasive species in the area. The eggs that are laid by the spotted lanternfly female tend to be fairly obscured. They look like bark or they look kind of like mud, and it's easy to miss because of the way that they look and where they're laid. Some of them are out in obvious areas. They'll sometimes put them on like mailboxes or even cars or on the side of your home. But when it's on a tree, they can blend in due to a secretion that the female will lay on top of the eggs. So here's a female doing that. She will exude this white goo from her body. As it goes on top of the eggs, it will begin to harden and it will turn brown, and that obscures that pile of eggs. This is there to help the eggs to survive the winter. As I've alluded to before, we want to avoid the cold air temperatures. Having this covering on top of the eggs results in, I think, about a 40% higher survival rate than eggs that are uncovered. But this makes it difficult for people to see them. It also means that they're pretty tightly glued to the tree, so they're not going to get taken off by the tree shaker. This is not something that everybody in Kentucky is going to have to contend with. The only confirmed infestations that I can speak of right now are in Gallatin, Carroll, Boone, Kenton, Henry, Owen, Grant, and Campbell counties. If you go closer to Cincinnati, that's where the infestation is at its strongest in Kentucky. There have been sightings in other locations. There's also the potential if you drive to one of these counties and purchase a Christmas tree and then bring it home with you, you could have spotted lanternfly eggs in there. So if you drive to Campbell County and take your tree home to a different county, like say maybe Greenup County or something, if you make that long distance trip, you could haul some of these insects with you. It's unlikely that they're going to hatch and then get out of your house and infest the area, but it is something to be conscientious of. We do sometimes move these invasive species around and give them a helping hand to find new locations. So those of you who are watching from those counties, this could happen to you. You could have these eggs come inside with you, and then the nymphs could begin to emerge, like I said, sort of depending on when you put the tree out, maybe close to Christmas Day. These are the nymphs as they emerge from the eggs. Those eggs, as I said before, are very obscured because of that stuff that's on top of them. That almost looks like these insects are being spontaneously generated from the bark of the tree just because of the cracks and crevices of it. But these are spotted lanternfly babies. Ooh, cute. Away in a manger. Here's the spotted lanternfly starting to pop its way out of these eggs, and they'll start to crawl around. It's unlikely that they're going to live for very long, as I mentioned before. They don't do very well in the dry air of our homes in the winter. Insects don't, but it is possible that they could start skittering around. They could even try to begin feeding on the plant, but they're not going to establish an infestation in the home. By far, though, the most famous Christmas tree hitchhikers that we deal with, in extension at least, are the praying mantises. So, praying mantises overwinter in egg cases. This is something from Cornell, I believe from Cornell, if I remember correctly, that they produced that shows some of the egg cases or ootheca that are common in New York and the northeastern United States. We don't have all five of these here in Kentucky. In Kentucky, we are mostly going to find A, the Carolina mantis, which is that kind of elongated oval-like one next to the quarter, or D and E, the Chinese or European mantises. We generally only have these three species in Kentucky. The Chinese mantis is probably the most commonly found ootheca. It looks like a big ball of that kind of foam insulation. You can see it there above letter D on the kind of green stem. So they're kind of globular and orange in color. And then the European mantis, I think, looks like an over-exaggerated rib cage. Like there's a center sternum and then hundreds of ridges kind of going away from that center sternum, and it creates the appearance of something with lots of tiny little ribs. So D&E, the Chinese and European mantises, these are introduced species. The Carolina mantis is a native species. You can find all of these on pine trees and other trees that are used for Christmas trees, but the Chinese mantis seems to be the most commonly encountered one. One interesting side note, again, I didn't think I would ever talk about Taylor Swift in an academic setting, but I would be remiss if I didn't recount that Taylor Swift, as part of her kind of biography, claims to have been involved with this quite a bit. So this is a little golden book that my daughter has because she likes Taylor Swift. And we were reading it the first time when we bought it, and I turned the page, and she describes in her life that her family owned a Christmas tree farm. It's sort of presented as this was like their livelihood. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but they owned this Christmas tree farm, and it was apparently very popular, and it was a big deal for their sort of family traditions. And she was expected to participate in helping to manage the farm. And the job that she was given, according to numerous interviews that she's given, you can watch her on Jimmy Fallon. There's a clip on YouTube of her talking about this. She was supposed to go and inspect the trees, and she was supposed to pick off the egg pods. So she calls them egg pods. She doesn't use the term ootheca. I would love for her to do that. I think that would be funny. But she was in charge of bug picking. And she says, oh, my mom and dad, they didn't want anybody to get a buggy surprise on Christmas morning. So there's an etymological connection to Taylor Swift that I never would have imagined. But it is true that this is something that people are concerned with. They don't want this to happen. When she talks about it, she's fairly accurate in the way that she discusses this. She makes some assertions about firs being their favorite, which are also some of the favorite Christmas trees. I haven't seen data to support that assertion, but it seems plausible that it's possible. What happens is those oothecas that I was showing you before, due to the warmth of the home, they're likely to hatch usually around Christmas Day. Here are some oothecas hatching, and then the resulting mantids taking their first steps, so strolling around. What they're going to do is probably wander on the ootheca as their bodies dry and harden. And then as soon as everybody's kind of ready, there's a lot of cannibalism. So if you don't want mantis cannibalism to be a part of your Christmas morning, I would understand that. But that is most likely what is going to happen, is that they're going to eat their brothers and sisters because there's no other thing to eat. That is if they survive that dry air again. There can be up to about 400 mantises that will come out of this. Sometimes people discover this as they're installing the tree, as they're putting it into the tree stand. If you do that, you can just snip the twig or whatever it is that it's attached to off, or you can put a screwdriver behind it and pop it off, and then take it and put it outside. So hopefully it will develop normally. You can also put it into a container and hatch them yourself and try to rear the mantises so you can release them. But by and large, if people don't notice this, they'll start to see them crawling around on the tree or down below. And these are big and noticeable, and people tend to sort of be startled and freaked out a little bit. They don't come with hats, unfortunately. They could be far more festive, like I was trying to be at the start of the show. But this is something that can be quite weird and alarming to people. But they're not going to harm you. They're not going to do anything. I would be remiss if didn't point out that there are dozens of other things that people have found in trees throughout the years. I couldn't go into all of it today, but I did go on to Reddit. There is a group there, a Reddit subreddit called What's This Bug? There's a few of these, but I think this is the biggest one, the most popular one. And if you just type in Christmas trees to what's this bug, you'll find hundreds of posts where people are freaking out because of what they've discovered. So here's one: wasps coming out of the Christmas tree, some sort of ichneumon. This is, in fact, an ichneumon wasp. These are parasitoids that could attack aphids or lots of other things, including scale insects. So it is possible that they could finish their development inside of your home as well and then emerge and fly around. They can't sting people. They're not going to cause problems for you. They can simply be ignored and they will die. But this is one possibility. There have been hornets in Christmas trees as well. European hornets have overwintered amongst the branches of the trees, especially if there's lots of them, kind of creating a nice warm pocket on the inside, and they could emerge and fly out. So that would be a bigger, scarier, more stabby wasp that you could deal with, that we would want to confront. Here was another one I found. These are what are these bugs coming from my real Christmas tree and infested my house? So they didn't infest the house. I'm going to guess they were gone probably not long after posting this, but these are bark lice. We can tell based on the angle of the wing. The other possibility here could be a dusky winged lacewing. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I would guess that this is a bark louse based just on this one photograph that I saw. These are things that feed on decaying material on the plant. They don't infest the home. The name is a little misleading. Bark lice do not create a louse-like problem on your head. They are lice on the tree. They're also sometimes called bark cattle, particularly when they're a little bit bigger. But all of these, they're harmless. They don't need to be managed with insecticides. You can check the tree as you're setting it up to see if you see things hidden in there, uthicas, spiders, what have you, and you can brush them off then. The tree shaker helps as you're purchasing it. If insects do show up at some point around Christmas, they can just be simply vacuumed up and disposed of. You can wipe them up with a wet rag. The one thing that we push back against very strongly is spraying the tree. Do not treat the tree preventively as you're bringing it into the home with something like home defense. It's nothing against home defense. It's just not what it's intended for. And now you have a pesticide-laden holiday tree that is standing above your presence. We also don't want people releasing bug bombs near it if they see insects on the tree. This is not something that's going to infest the home. None of these are. It's not something that's going to create any amount of damage. They can simply be sanitized away. We don't need to involve pesticides in this particular problem. That's it for my holiday tale. Billy and Renee, I don't know if you wanted to share. Have you ever had a bug in your tree come out and start walking around?
I have not. But I'm telling you, this special that you've been talking about sounds more like the creepy things from our forest than the Christmas special.
You're going to make her never get a real tree, Jonathan. Yeah.
It's not a high percentage of trees that this happens with. I don't think.
Should you like examine your tree from before you like grab it and go, yeah, I want that one? You know, it's like
I will say that the Christmas tree producers, they try to do as much as they can before the tree goes home with you to make sure that this doesn't happen. The shaker is a big part of that. They also check the trees because they don't want the phone call. They don't want to be called up. You sold me a passel of bugs with my Christmas tree.
And it's a Christmas gift you do not want.
Yes. Yes. It's not the nativity scene most people are looking for.
Not the jelly of the month club, right? Yeah.
No. And why is it all of them like, is it just the timing? Like Christmas Day, hey, here you go. Merry Christmas, bug.
I don't mean to imply it only happens on Christmas Day. It can happen before, it can happen right after. But yeah, the degree day accumulation for some of these species, if you put your tree up like the day after Thanksgiving, you're giving your insect friends that are in the tree about a month to accumulate some growing degree days. And that's going to happen very rapidly with those consistent temperatures that we provide. And yeah, it seems that it often times out to be right around Christmas.
No. Okay.
Surprise, surprise. I
The
love it.
gift that keeps on giving.
Oh, yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, really informative and interesting. Yeah, I think I've had a few of those over the years in some of our trees, but yeah,
It
never.
just means it's alive.
Yeah, no, I mean, never like overwhelming though, right? You know, a
Yeah.
few here or there, but yeah, nothing too big concern. Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent.
Well, I'm excited to learn from Ellen. Dr. Crocker next.
I know. Well,
Yeah,
we're gonna try to get down to what is this bittersweet called, right? You know,
exactly.
This is
they
no
keep painting
fun,
the name on us.
Jonathan.
I know.
It's no fun going after you. Here
I
you
know.
are talking about, Christmas Day cannibalism and
I
Taylor Swift, and I'm just
know.
waiting for the album of Christmas carols to come out.
I
That
really want her to have a song that is about this experience.
praying
Yeah.
mantises emerging on Christmas Day.
Maybe we could
Yeah,
do a cover band, Ellen.
yeah.
There
Oh,
you
I
go.
like this. I like this. I'm in.
Oh, yes. I love it. Dr. Crocker,
Dr.
greetings.
Crocker, woohoo!
So
What are
nice
we
to
talking
join you
about?
all. So today we're kind of also going on the theme of things that maybe are associated with this time of year and the decorations, but that you probably don't want to be seeing around, and that is round-leafed bittersweet. So if this looks familiar, there's a lot of like holiday decorations made out of bittersweet, and you might see these like cool berries in ornaments or wreaths or some kind of display. I don't know if you've seen this before, but you'll find it around. And unfortunately, it also has a darker side to it. So it's not just looking pretty in our displays. And I'll talk a little bit about that today.
All right, looking forward to it.
Yes, as always, appreciate you, Dr. Crocker. Thank you.
Oh, well, happy to be on. And so, yeah, if you're seeing this, or if you're seeing vines taking over your woods and choking your trees, it could be round-leafed bittersweet, an invasive plant that can cause problems in woodlands and edges. So in this edition of Pesky Plants, I'm going to be talking about round-leafed bittersweet, what it looks like, potential lookalikes, because there are a few, and how you can manage it. So what is round-leafed bittersweet? So I want to start this out by saying that it goes by many names. So if you have heard of Oriental bittersweet, or Asian bittersweet, or maybe round leaf bittersweet instead of round-leaved bittersweet, all of these are names that are used for this plant. There has been a move towards round-leaved bittersweet, just I think because it's trying to describe the shape of the leaf a little bit better. But I will say that leaf shape is a very variable in this plant. So it might look different depending on where on the plant you're looking at it. This is a plant that's native to different parts of Asia. China, Japan, Korea, and it was introduced to North America in the 1800s. So it's been a while, mostly as an ornamental plant. Now, however, it's broadly recognized as an invasive pest, and it is widespread throughout the eastern US, and you will see it on lists of most problematic invasive plants in a lot of areas. So it produces really abundant fruit that you can see here that are spread by birds and animals. And while they do have showy appeal, especially this time of year, when they may make their way into wreaths and holiday decorations, the dark side to this plant is the ecological impact that it can have. So it can grow really rapidly. It can carpet over other plants, both those that are growing lower down to the ground, even into the canopy of the tallest trees. So it can smother vegetation, and it can also directly negatively impact those trees. So this photo shows some vines growing so tightly around a tree trunk, spiraling around it, that it's going to eventually strangle that tree, girdle that tree. Not only is that a health problem for that tree, but it's also potentially an economic problem in that this is going to be a really distorted growth form of that tree. So if you're seeing this and thinking about how do I identify round-leafed bittersweet, here are a few tips. It's a woody perennial vine that's also deciduous. So it's going to lose its leaves in the wintertime. And here you can see it in the wintertime, just a spot that's been totally taken over it. Lots of those twisting little vines all over everything that's growing there, into the canopy of the trees and the shrubs that are there, over things, twisting around stems and trunks. The leaves themselves are alternately arranged, so not opposite each other on a stem, but alternate, and kind of glossy color. They are pretty variable in shape. So even though it's called round-leaved, some of the leaves are going to be more rounded. Some of them are going to be more pointed. And especially, typically, you'll see more of the rounded ones towards the base, more of the pointed football-shaped ones further along the vine. It's also going to have these serrated edges. So if you're trying to figure it out, I'd say get a good look at that, but also see if you can look at some other features as well, like the fruits. So the leaves will turn yellow in the late summer to fall, and it'll also produce fruit then. The flowers aren't very noticeable. They're kind of small and green. So I'm not even showing them to you here, but one interesting note is that there are male and female plants. So some of them will produce these fruits and others will not. But these fruits for the round-leafed bittersweet, the invasive plant, tend to have kind of this yellow to orange papery covering over this redder color fruit. So that's what we're looking for with round-leaved bittersweet, the invasive plant we don't want to see. Now, there are some potential lookalikes to it. In fact, we have a Native American bittersweet that we don't want to accidentally confuse with it, but I will say it is very rare comparatively. So if you're seeing a lot of it and it's producing lots and lots of fruits, it's probably the invasive, not the native. But a couple other ways to distinguish them, that the fruits are going to be structured differently on our Native American bittersweet. Maybe a slightly different color, more reddish. They're also only going to occur in like clusters at the ends of those shoots, at the end of those vines. On the other hand, if you compare this and you see a couple of these like clusters together with something like this or this, those are going to emerge all along. So a little bit different there. And also, if you're seeing a ton of it, again, it's probably different. The leaves are also pretty variable. So another challenge, but check out the fruits. There are other vines, both native and non-native, that you might confuse it with. So this is greenbrier or smilax. We have several different species in our area, but some native plants that you might not enjoy running into due to the fact that they have thorns and can kind of locally take over. But not typically as big of a problem, not something that's going to take over a whole area. And another way to distinguish these, not only do they have thorns, the vine shoots are different, the leaves are very different in shape and have these parallel veins running down them. There are also other invasive vines that you should look for and also try to get rid of. So one of them that kind of has a similar growth form would be Japanese honeysuckle. And here you can see an area with lots of Japanese honeysuckle, and those vines are really wrapping around the trees and the shoots in a similar way. Now they do tend to be a little bit smaller, a little bit, not as big in diameter, those vines, but can look pretty similar in carpet over areas. But the leaves and the flowers and the fruit look totally different on Japanese honeysuckle. The flowers are going to be those fragrant honeysuckle flowers. The leaves are going to be opposite each other on the stem. The berries for this one are actually going to be a black color. So very different. And then one other that you might confuse it with, but if you do, it's okay because you should also get rid of this one, is winter creeper. So the fruits of winter creeper kind of look a little bit similar. You've got these orange fruits that are kind of bursting out of this papery light yellow capsule, but this is an evergreen plant, so it's always going to have green leaves. The leaves also have a different orientation. They're going to be opposite each other, not alternate, and just a different form. So when it comes to managing roundleaf bittersweet, control often requires a mix of mechanical and chemical practices and repeated monitoring because it could come right back in. So because you have this issue where your male plants aren't going to be producing the berries, one thing to consider would be to prioritize getting rid of those plants that are producing seeds first, because those are going to spread out to other areas. But in practice, if you're trying to deal with a larger infestation, you're going to need to think a little bit bigger picture than that. So if you've got small plants, seedlings, these could be hand pulled, especially when the ground is moist. You just need to make sure to get as much of that root system as possible so it doesn't resprout from what remains. And if you were to have a infestation that's kind of carpeting the ground in an area, regular mowing could certainly knock it back, although typically not going to entirely remove it unless you're doing this really, really regularly. Now, for vines growing up into a tree, it would be recommended to cut a pretty good chunk of that vine out. So don't just like cut a little slit right here. Cut a chunk of that vine out, which will kill the above ground portion that's growing in the tree. Don't try to pull that out. Not only could you damage the tree in doing that, but you could damage yourself. You could pull a branch or something down onto yourself, and it's really not needed. That part's going to die on its own if you've taken a chunk out of it. Then there's the question of what do you do with the bottom part? You certainly could do a cut stump application, putting some herbicide directly on that cut stump. However, what a lot of studies have found is that it's actually more effective to let that shoot back up and then to do a foliar herbicide application. So whether we're talking about that cut stump approach or an area that's kind of covered and accessible, foliar herbicide has been effective for round-leaf bittersweet. And one of the common approaches would be something like a triclopyr-containing herbicide mixed with a surfactant so it can get through that waxy cuticle of the leaf. Late summer and early fall is typically the best time for that type of application. But there are other approaches. I mentioned a cut stump application earlier, especially if you have those larger diameter vines. Now you could expect some resprouts from that, and so something you want to follow up on. There are also other approaches that could be good depending on your situation, something like a hack and squirt approach if you have long vines that are growing away from a tree trunk, or even a basal bark application for that same kind of scenario. But whatever you're doing, make sure you do your research on any herbicide well before applying it. Read the label carefully to ensure you're protecting yourself, you're minimizing any potential damage to things you want to keep, and you're being as effective as possible in your work. And then, while it might seem obvious, I don't recommend buying wreaths or decorations made with roundleaf bittersweet. That's because those fruits, if they fall, they can make new plants. So if you put those in your compost or somewhere else, they can spread. And you will still find it for sale. And a little word of caution, a lot of the research that I was finding online suggests that sometimes you're going to see American bittersweet for sale, but it's actually a non-native bittersweet. So something to keep an eye out for. You don't want to be caught up in that mistaken ID. So with that, thanks for joining me today and learning a little bit more about the invasive plant round-leafed bittersweet. And if you'd like to learn more, please reach out, and best of luck keeping your woods healthy and getting rid of some of those invasives.
Well, thank you, Ellen. We really appreciate that. And I'm really thinking that I mislabeled the name of the show. I should have called it The Gifts That Keep on Giving. So anyway, but we appreciate all that you do for our show too, and thank you very much for being on today. I greatly appreciate that. We've had a couple of comments in about some places you can get Christmas trees, and Dr. Larson had said maybe somebody should name it the Silver Bugs of Christmas for a band name, which would be kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm in. We got to do a show with our new band.
I know, yeah, because like Ellen could easily, throw in some stuff, and Dr. Larson could throw in some stuff. We'd be good to go. So, but you both are muted.
Not as exciting as cannibalizing erupting ornaments of praying mantises, but I would argue more don't want to see round leaf bittersweet than the praying mantises. So
Yeah, invasive species.
I actually had praying mantises one time. I think they might have gotten behind my shutter because we had it all over our house. I mean,
Yep.
so I don't know if they just laid eggs behind there or what, but it was kind of cool because it was outside, and we could watch all the little ones coming out. So, but thank you both for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And you all, we really appreciate all the work you've done all year long because I know I count on you two for a lot of shows. So I greatly appreciate you helping me out all year.
It's a lot of fun. Happy
Thank you.
yeah,
holidays to you.
thank you.
All right. So that was a really great show. Really appreciate everybody being on. And you can always go to fromthewoodstoday.com if you want any to watch any of these shows. And I really appreciate you because, like I said before, if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be doing this. So if you have any show ideas, let me know because 2026 is fastly approaching. And so I need a whole nother year full of shows. So if you have any questions that you think, hey, I would like to know more about this. Shoot me an email at forestry.extension@uky.edu and we will try to get those answered on a show. Next week is our last show for 2025. We will be talking about conifer IDs. So if you want to learn about all the Christmas trees that could have those bugs on them and how you would ID your tree, Lori Thomas will be on to talk about that. And also Anna Weicker will be on again to show us how to make some wreaths. So that'll out of those conifers. So that'll be a very fun show to watch as well. So we will see you all next week. Take care and we will see you again. Bye.